My name is Serena. I tell fictional stories of mystery, suspense, and horror. The kind that unfolds slowly in the quiet moments when the world feels a little farther away. Tonight, I'm not here to explain anything. I'm here to tell you a story. So take a moment, lower the lights, settle in, and if you're willing, come listen with me.
The wind howls across Blackwater Point like a wounded animal, carrying with it the taste of salt and something else, something ancient. They say the lighthouse had stood here for over 100 years, watching over ships that never made it home. Tonight, you're about to discover why. This is the story of Marcus Webb, a lighthouse keeper who took a job he thought would be peaceful, remote, quiet. But some silences are louder than screams, and some jobs come with a price that can't be paid in money. It's October 15th, and Marcus has been alone on Blackwater Point for exactly 7 days. Chapter 1. The arrival. Marcus Webb wasn't running from anything. At least, that's what he told himself as the small ferry cut through the grey waters toward Blackwater Point. He was a man of 35, with tired eyes and hands that had known honest work. The advertisement had been simple. Lighthouse keeper needed. 6-month contract. Solitude guaranteed. Solitude, that's what he needed. No questions. No memories knocking at his door in the middle of the night. Just the rhythm of the waves and the turning of the light. The lighthouse keeper before him, a man named Eugene Blackwell, had left suddenly. The hiring agency didn't say much about it. Health reasons, they'd mumbled, eyes not quite meeting his. But the pay was good. Too good, maybe. Marcus should have wondered why. The ferry captain was a weathered man named Tom, who spoke little but watched much. As they approached the rocky shore, he finally broke his silence. "You sure about this, son?" Tom's voice was gravelly, worn smooth by decades of sea air. "That light, it's not like the others." Marcus forced a smile. "I've worked lighthouses before. I know the routine. This one's different," Tom insisted, his knuckles white on the wheel. Old Eugene, he lasted 3 months. The one before him made it 6 weeks. "You start hearing things out here, seeing things. I don't believe in ghost stories," Marcus replied, though something cold touched his spine. Tom just shook his head and helped unload Marcus's supplies onto the small dock. Canned goods, batteries, books, everything he'd need for a month before the next supply run. "Radio check every 3 days, Tom said. "Miss one, and I'm coming back, understood?" Marcus nodded, watching the ferry pull away, its engine fading into the sound of waves and gulls. Then he turned to face his new home. The lighthouse rose before him like a stone finger pointing at the grey sky. White paint peeled from its surface in long strips, revealing darker stone beneath. The keeper's cottage sat at its base, small and squat, with windows that looked like empty eyes. Marcus climbed the path, his boots crunching on gravel mixed with crushed shells. When he reached the door, he found it unlocked. The interior smelled of brine and something else, something sweet and rotten, like flowers left too long in a vase. The cottage was sparse. A bed, a wood stove, a small kitchen, and a table with 2 chairs. Only 2 who had needed the second chair. On the table sat a leather journal, its cover worn and water-stained. A note lay on top, written in shaking handwriting. "To whoever comes next, don't trust the light. Don't listen to the knocking. And whatever you do, don't open the door after midnight." E.B. Marcus picked up the note, frowning. Eugene Blackwell, the previous keeper. This must be his idea of a joke, hazing the new guy with spooky stories. He crumpled the note and tossed it into the cold stove. Ghost stories. He didn't have time for ghost stories. That first night, Marcus climbed the spiral stairs of the lighthouse, 147 steps winding up into darkness. His flashlight beam danced across stone walls covered in strange mark scratches. Really, like someone had dragged their fingernails across the surface. Probably just erosion, or birds. At the top, the lamp room waited. The great Fresnel lens gleamed even in darkness, its prisms catching and multiplying his flashlight beam into 1,000 fragments. The mechanism was old, but well maintained. Someone, probably Eugene, had kept it in working order. Marcus checked the fuel, tested the rotation, examined the weather sensors. Everything was functional. At sunset, he activated the light, watching it spring to life and begin its slow rotation. The beam swept across the dark water, illuminating nothing but waves and the occasional spray of foam against distant rocks. He should have felt satisfaction, pride in a job begun. Instead, He felt watched. Marcus descended the stairs as night fell completely. The cottage felt smaller in the darkness, the walls closer. He lit a fire in the stove, heated a can of soup, and tried to read one of the paperback mysteries he'd brought. But his eyes kept drifting to the windows, to the darkness pressing against the glass. At 9 p.m., he heard the first knock. It came from the front door. 3 taps, slow and deliberate. Knock, knock. Marcus set down his book and listened. The wind was picking up, he told himself. Something blown against the door. 3 more knocks, harder this time. He stood and walked to the door, hand on the knob. Hello. Nothing. Is someone there? The wind answered, howling around the lighthouse like a living thing. Marcus opened the door and found nothing. No one. Just the path stretching down to the dock, silver in the moonlight, and the endless expanse of dark water beyond. He closed the door and locked it. Driftwood, he thought. Or maybe Tom had come back to check on him. But Tom's ferry was hours away by now. Marcus returned to his book, but he couldn't concentrate. The fire crackled. The lighthouse beam swept past the windows in its endless rotation, and somewhere, far off or very close, he heard a sound like fingernails on stone. He told himself it was the wind, but the wind doesn't whisper names. Chapter 2. The Journal. By the 3rd day, Marcus had almost convinced himself that he was adjusting. The knocking came every night at 9 p.m., but he'd stopped going to the door. Probably just the structure settling, or the change in pressure as the temperature dropped. Old buildings made sounds. That's all it was. The radio check with Tom was brief and uneventful. Everything good out there? Tom had asked, his voice crackling with static. Marcus had said yes, and that was true enough. The light was functioning perfectly. He was fed and warm. What more could he ask for? But he wasn't sleeping well. The dreams, when they came, were vivid and wrong. He'd find himself climbing the lighthouse stairs, but they went on forever, spiraling up into darkness that his flashlight couldn't penetrate. And at the top, something waited, something that breathed in rhythm with the waves. He'd wake with his heart pounding, sheets soaked with sweat, and the sound of the ocean would seem to carry voices in it, calling, beckoning. On the morning of the 4th day, Marcus decided to explore the keeper's cottage more thoroughly. There had to be something to do besides maintain the light and stare at the walls. In a cabinet beneath the sink, he found cleaning supplies and a bottle of whiskey, half empty. In a drawer by the bed, he discovered a stack of old navigation charts, yellowed with age. And in the closet, pushed to the back behind spare blankets, he found Eugene Blackwell's journal. It was the same leather-bound book he'd seen on the table his first day. He must have unconsciously placed it here, though he didn't remember doing so. The cover was damp to the touch, despite the dry closet. When he opened it, the pages seemed to resist, as if reluctant to reveal their secrets. The first entries were mundane. Eugene had arrived in July, full of optimism. He described the beauty of the sunrise over the water, the satisfaction of maintaining the light, the pleasure of solitude. But as Marcus flipped through the pages, the handwriting began to change. It grew shakier, more cramped. Words were crossed out and rewritten. Some passages had been scratched through so violently that the pen had torn the paper. Marcus sat at the table and began to read chronologically. July 15th. First week complete. The work is exactly what I needed. Simple, honest. The light turns, the ships pass safely, and I am alone with my thoughts. I can't remember the last time I felt this peaceful. July 28th. Strange sounds at night. Probably seabirds nesting in the rocks below. I should investigate during low tide. August 3rd. The knocking has become regular. Always at 9 p.m. Always 3 times. I checked the door twice tonight, but there's never anyone there. Tom says the previous keeper mentioned sounds too. He says it's just the building settling. I want to believe him. August 10th. I found scratches on the lighthouse walls today. Deep ones. They look fresh animals. But what animal could reach 15 feet up a stone wall? August 19th. I heard my wife's voice last night. She called my name from outside. But my wife is in Portland, 300 miles away. I checked the radio. No messages. I'm sleeping poorly. Maybe the isolation is getting to me. August 27th. There's something in the water. I see it when the light sweeps across. Just beneath the surface. Too big to be a seal. Too angular. It follows the beam. I think it's watching me. Marcus looked up from the journal, his mouth dry. Through the window, he could see the ocean, grey and churning under an overcast sky. Nothing moved on its surface but waves. He turned back to the journal. The next entries grew worse. September 2nd, I opened the door. I know I shouldn't have, but the knocking was so persistent, so human. When I opened it, there was nothing there. But the smell, God, the smell, like the ocean floor, like dead things in deep water. And for just a moment, I saw wet footprints leading from the door into the cottage. They faded as I watched. September 8th, the lighthouse light revealed something last night. When the beam swept across the water at 3:17 a.m., I saw them, dozens of them, standing in the shallows around the rocks. They were facing the lighthouse, facing me. I turned off the light. I know I shouldn't have, but I couldn't bear to see them again when the beam came around. When I turned it back on 5 minutes later, they were gone. What have I done? What if a ship was out there? September 14th, I tried to leave, called Tom on the radio and told him I was sick, needed to come ashore. He said he'd come tomorrow, but tomorrow came and I was still here. I don't remember deciding to stay. I went to pack, and then I was sitting at this table, and hours had passed. It won't let me leave. September 19th, I understand now. The light isn't to guide ships, it's to feed something. Every night, the beam sweeps across the water, and they gather below, drawn like moths, but they're not interested in the ships. They're interested in the keeper. In me, in whoever tends the light. We're not guardians. We're bait. September 23rd, I'm leaving the journal for whoever comes next. If you're reading this, you need to leave now. Before the first month ends, that's when it happens. That's when the door opens from the other side. I can hear them gathering tonight, more than ever before. They know I understand. They know I'm trying to warn you, but you have to believe me. You have to. The entry ended mid-sentence, the pen trailing off the page in a jagged line. There were no more entries. Marcus sat back, the journal still open before him. His hands were shaking. This was madness. Isolation-induced paranoia. Eugene had clearly suffered a breakdown out here. That's why he'd left. That's why the pay was so good they couldn't keep anyone in this position. But even as Marcus rationalized, he couldn't shake the memory of the knocking, the sense of being watched, the dreams of things in deep water. He checked the calendar on his phone. October 18th. He'd arrived on October 15th, only 3 days ago. The journal said the door opened after the first month ends. He had time. He could finish his contract or leave early if things got worse. Tom would be back with supplies in 11 days. If he wanted to leave then, he could. Marcus closed the journal and shoved it back into the closet. He wouldn't read it again. Wouldn't let Eugene's paranoia infect him. But that night, at 9 p.m., when the knocking came, it wasn't 3 taps. It was 7. And when Marcus looked through the window, he saw wet footprints on the porch, leading to the door. Footprints shaped like feet, but wrong. Too long. Too many joints. He didn't sleep that night. He sat in the chair by the stove, poker in hand, and listened to the ocean whisper his name. Chapter 3. The pattern the next morning brought fog so thick that Marcus couldn't see past the lighthouse tower. The beam, still rotating automatically, disappeared into whiteness, just yards from the lamp room. It felt like being inside a cloud, or inside something's breath. Marcus performed his maintenance duties mechanically. Check the fuel, clean the lens, test the rotation. Normal tasks in an increasingly abnormal situation. His hands worked while his mind raced. He'd made a decision during the sleepless night. He would document everything. If Eugene's journal was evidence of deteriorating mental health, then Marcus's logs would be evidence of his sanity. He would note the times of disturbances, the nature of sounds, any possible rational explanations. He would prove to himself that there was nothing supernatural happening here. He started a new notebook, writing with careful precision. October 19th, 0900 hours, thick fog, visibility less than 50 feet, lighthouse functioning normally, heard knocking last night at 2100 hours, 7 distinct sounds, investigated and found moisture on porch, consistent with fog condensation, no evidence of visitors. C. Simple explanations, nothing to fear. But as he wrote, a thought nagged at him. The footprints hadn't been random puddles. They'd had shape, structure, and they'd been warm when he'd touched one, despite the cold night air. He pushed the thought away and continued his inspection. The lighthouse tower needed it. As he climbed the spiral stairs, his flashlight beam caught those scratches again, the ones Eugene had mentioned. Now that he was looking, they were everywhere, dozens of them, hundreds maybe. scoring the stone in parallel lines. Marcus stopped at the 47th step and examined them closely. 4 lines, parallel each, about as wide as a finger. They dragged downward, as if something had been climbing up and had slipped, claws raking stone as it fell. But what could make marks this deep in solid rock? His flashlight flickered. Marcus smacked it against his palm, and the beam steadied. Just old batteries. He'd replaced them when he got back down. He continued climbing, but now he was counting the scratches. So many. Years of them, maybe. All clawing upward, toward the light, or downward, from it. When he reached the lamp room, he found something new. On the window facing the ocean, someone had written in the condensation, "They come from below." The letters were already fading, drawn recently, within the last hour. Marcus spun around, his heart hammering. The lamp room was small, barely 15 feet across. There was nowhere to hide, but he was alone. He had to be alone. He was 40 meters above the ground, in a locked lighthouse, on an island accessible only by boat. He was alone. He wiped away the message with his sleeve and told himself it was old condensation, that Eugene had written it weeks ago, and somehow it had just now become visible. But condensation didn't work that way, and Marcus had been here less than 5 days. The message was fresh. He descended the stairs faster than was safe, his footsteps echoing in the narrow shaft. When he burst out of the tower door, the fog had begun to lift, revealing the grey ocean beyond. Empty, nothing but waves and the distant smudge of the mainland. Marcus pulled out the radio and called Tom. "Blackwater Light to mainland, come in." Static hissed and popped. Then, "Mainland here. That you, Marcus? It's not scheduled check-in day." "Tom, I need to ask you something about Eugene Blackwell." A long pause. "What about him? What happened to him? Really?" Another pause, longer this time. When Tom spoke again, his voice was careful. "He left. You know that. But why? What did he tell you?" "Marcus, if you're having trouble out there, just tell me." Tom sighed, the sound crackling through the radio. "He didn't tell me much. When I picked him up, he was different. Wouldn't talk, wouldn't even look at the lighthouse as we pulled away. Just sat there, staring at his hands. He had scratches on his arms, deep ones. Said he'd done it himself, in his sleep. A week later, I heard he'd checked himself into a facility up in Augusta, psychiatric care." Marcus's grip tightened on the radio. "Did he say anything? Anything at all? Just one thing?" Tom said quietly. He said, "It wanted me to stay. It wants all of us to stay." Then he wouldn't say another word. The radio clicked off. Marcus stood in the silence, fog swirling around him, and he understood something fundamental. Eugene hadn't been crazy. Or if he had been, his insanity had been a rational response to something real. The question was, what? That evening, Marcus decided to test a theory. If something was trying to communicate, or frighten him, or drive him away, then it would have a pattern. Everything had a pattern. He just had to observe carefully. He set up a notebook by the window and prepared to document everything that happened after sunset. The time, the nature of the disturbance, his own reactions, cold, clinical, scientific. At 8:45 p.m., the temperature inside the cottage dropped noticeably. Marcus noted it. At 8:52 p.m., he heard footsteps on the gravel outside, slow, deliberate, circling the cottage. He noted it, but didn't look outside. At 8:59 p.m., everything went silent. Even the ocean seemed to hold its breath. At 9 p.m. exactly, the knocking began. Not 3 taps this time, not 7. This time, the knocking moved around the cottage, traveling from the front door to the window, to the back door, to the other window, in a circuit, knock, 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 at each point, like something checking for weaknesses in the structure. Marcus wrote it all down, his hands steady, despite the fear crawling up his spine. This was data, just data. At 9:07 p.m., the knocking stopped. At 9:08 p.m., something scratched at the door. Long, slow drags that made his teeth ache. At 9:15 p.m., silence returned. Marcus exhaled and put down his pen. Then, at 9:16 p.m., his phone, which had no signal and hadn't had signal since he'd arrived, lit up with a text message from an unknown number, a local number, if the area code meant anything. The message contained only 2 words, "Let us in." Marcus stared at the screen until it went dark. Then he picked up his notebook and wrote it down, his handwriting not quite as steady as before. Whatever was out there, it was learning to use new tools, and it was getting closer. Chapter 4. The Threshold. The next 2 days passed in a haze of exhaustion and hypervigilance. Marcus barely slept. When he did, the dreams came visions of the ocean floor, of things that walked on too many legs, of mouths full of angles instead of teeth. He'd wake gasping, sure that something was in the room with him, only to find himself alone. But alone wasn't reassuring anymore. The messages continued. Every night, his phone would light up at exactly 9:16 p.m. with a new text from the unknown number. "We know you're listening. The light calls us, soon." Each message was logged in his notebook, evidence that he was not imagining this. On the morning of October 22nd, Marcus made a discovery that changed everything. He was cleaning the lamp room, a routine he'd come to depend on for its normalcy, when he noticed a loose panel in the floor. It hadn't been loose before, he was sure of it. The panel was near the base of the Fresnel lens, and when he pried it up, he found a hidden compartment beneath. Inside was a metal box. With trembling hands, Marcus lifted it out. The box was old, perhaps as old as the lighthouse itself, made of tarnished brass with a simple clasp. No lock, as if whoever hid it had wanted it to be found eventually. He opened it. Inside were papers, dozens of them, yellowed and brittle. Letters, journal entries, newspaper clippings, all dating back decades. Over a century, in fact. The oldest was dated 1897. Marcus sat on the cold floor and began to read. The first document was a letter from the lighthouse's original keeper, a man named Nathaniel Crow. To the lighthouse board, "I must report an unusual occurrence. On the night of September 12th, while performing my duties, I observed strange lights in the water below the rocks. They moved with purpose, forming patterns that could not be natural. Upon investigation at low tide the following morning, I discovered evidence of something emerging from the sea. The rocks were scored with marks, and a substance like wet sand led from the waterline toward the lighthouse. I have barricaded the door and request immediate relief." The letter was unsigned at the bottom, as if Nathaniel had never finished it. The next document was a newspaper clipping from the Portland Herald. Dated October 1897, Lighthouse Keeper found dead. The body of Nathaniel Crow, keeper of the Blackwater Point Light, was discovered yesterday by supply boat captain Samuel Morton. Mr. Crow appears to have fallen from the lamp room to his death, though the manner of his fall remains unclear. The lighthouse door was found locked from the inside, and there were no signs of struggle. Authorities ruled a death, accidental though. Captain Morton reports that Mr. Crow's final journal entries spoke of visitors from beneath and a covenant broken. Marcus felt cold sweat on his forehead. He continued reading, document after document, each one telling variations of the same story. Keepers who heard things, saw things, tried to leave. Many succeeded, some didn't, but one document stood out from the rest. It was an old map, hand-drawn, showing Blackwater Point and the surrounding waters. On it, someone had marked a location offshore with a circled X and written beside it, "The old place. Entrance at full moon, low tide. Do not enter." Beneath the map was a final piece of paper, a letter written in a shaking hand, addressed to whom it may concern. "My name is Thomas Archer. I was keeper of this light in 1923. What I discovered must be recorded, though I doubt anyone will believe me. The lighthouse was not built to protect ships. It was built to contain something. Below the rocks, accessible only at the lowest tides of the full moon, there is an opening, a tunnel that descends into darkness. I entered it. God help me. I entered it. What I found there was not made by any human hand. Chambers carved from living rock, descending impossibly deep beneath the ocean floor. And in those chambers, I saw them. Dozens of them, hundreds, things that might once have been human, or might always have been something else. They were waiting. They've been waiting for longer than this lighthouse has stood, waiting for someone to turn off the light. The light keeps them down there. I don't understand how or why, but it does. It's a ward, a barrier. As long as it burns, they remain below, but they're patient. They'll try to make you turn it off. They'll wear you down with sounds, with visions, with messages. They'll become familiar to you, friendly even. And when you trust them, when you're tired enough, and lonely enough, and scared enough, they'll ask you to let them in. Don't turn off the light. Don't open the door. And for God's sake, don't go down into the tunnels. I barely escaped. The next keeper might not. The full moon comes in 3 days. If you're reading this, then you're already in danger. They'll be stronger. They'll try harder. You must resist. Keep the light burning. That's all that stands between them and the surface world. May God forgive me for not burning this place to the ground." The letter was dated November 1923. According to the newspaper clipping that followed it, Thomas Archer had disappeared a week later. His body was never found. Marcus sat in the lamp room, surrounded by the evidence of a century of horror, and felt the pieces click into place. The knocking, the messages, the scratches on the walls. Eugene's madness. All of it was real. All of it was true. And according to his phone's calendar, tonight was the full moon. He gathered the documents and descended the lighthouse stairs faster than was safe, his mind racing. He had to call Tom, had to get off this island before nightfall. Whatever was below the rocks, whatever was waiting in those tunnels, it would be at its strongest tonight. But when he reached for the radio, he found the battery compartment empty. The batteries were gone. He'd replaced them 2 days ago, he was certain of it. But now, nothing. His phone showed no signal. As always, the emergency beacon was in the supply room. Marcus ran to it and found the door locked. He didn't remember locking it. He didn't remember where he'd put the key. Panic, cold and sharp, lanced through him. He was trapped. Trapped with nightfall hours away and something in the deep places below stirring awake. The lighthouse had to keep burning. That was the one certainty. Whatever else happened, he couldn't let the light go out. Marcus went through the cottage, barricading doors, closing shutters, doing everything he could to seal himself in. Then he climbed the lighthouse stairs one more time, armed with nothing but a fire poker and the determination to keep the light alive. The sun began to set, and as darkness fell over Blackwater Point, Marcus heard the sound of stone grinding against stone from somewhere below the lighthouse. Deep below, where old tunnels waited, something was opening, something was rising, and the knocking, when it came at 9 p.m., shook the entire lighthouse tower. Chapter 5. The Covenant. The lamp room had never felt so fragile. Glass and metal and light, hanging suspended 40 meters above the rocks, while beneath it, something ancient stirred. Marcus stood at the center, one hand on the Fresnel lens, feeling the vibrations that traveled up through the stone. Knock, knock, knock. Not on doors this time. On the lighthouse itself. The entire structure resonated like a bell with each impact. Through the windows, Marcus could see the ocean, silver under the full moon, and in that silver light, he saw them. They emerged from the water in groups of 3 and 4, figures that had the shape of humans but moved wrong. Their limbs bent at angles that shouldn't exist, their heads tilted in ways that suggested necks made of something other than bone. And their eyes, God, their eyes reflected the lighthouse beam like animals caught in headlights. But they weren't animals. Dozens of them gathered at the base of the lighthouse, silent and patient, waiting. Marcus's phone buzzed. Another message. Turn off the light. Let us in. We only want to talk. His hands shook as he read it. Talk. As if these things could talk. As if they were anything that could be reasoned with. The knocking intensified. Now it came from inside the lighthouse, from the spiral stairs below. The sound of wet hands slapping stone. Dozens of them. Climbing upward, climbing toward him. Marcus grabbed the fire poker and positioned himself between the stairs and the lens. The light had to keep burning. That was all that mattered. Whatever came through that door, he would fight it. He would keep the light burning. But a small, terrified part of his mind whispered, "How long can you fight? How long before exhaustion takes you? Before you fall asleep and they turn it off themselves?" The door to the lamp room began to rattle in its frame. Something was testing it. Pushing. The wood creaked. The hinges groaned. Marcus tightened his grip on the poker. Then, suddenly, everything stopped. The knocking ceased. The rattling ended. Even the sound of the waves seemed to fade into absolute silence. Marcus stood, frozen, listening, his breath loud in his own ears. His phone lit up one more time. The message was different. "We have a proposal." Before Marcus could process this, a voice spoke from just outside the lamp room door. A human voice, familiar. "Marcus, Marcus, it's me, it's Tom. Open the door, son. I came to get you out of here." Marcus stared at the door. Tom. But Tom wasn't due for days, and Tom wouldn't have come at night. And Tom's ferry made noise. Marcus would have heard it arrive. "Tom," Marcus called out, his voice hoarse. "How did you get here?" "Swam," the voice replied, and it sounded exactly like Tom. "Came as fast as I could when you didn't answer the radio. I'm worried about you, Marcus. You sound like Eugene did. Let me in, let me help." "The radio's broken," Marcus said. I couldn't call. I know, Tom's voice said. That's why I came. Please, open the door. It's cold out here, and I'm not as young as I used to be. Marcus took a step toward the door, then stopped. Something was wrong. Tom had said he swam, but Tom's voice wasn't breathless, wasn't strained. It was perfectly calm, perfectly even. No one who'd just swum through October waters would sound like that. I can't, Marcus said. I'm sorry, but I can't. A long pause. Then the voice changed. It was still Tom's voice, but flatter now, empty. We've been patient, it said. We've been kind. We only want what was promised. Promised. Marcus backed away from the door. What are you talking about? The covenant, the voice said. The old covenant. The town gave us keepers, and we gave the town safe passage. For 200 years, this arrangement has stood. But now the keepers resist. They fight. They refuse to understand. I don't understand, Marcus said. What covenant? What do you want? To come in, the voice said simply. That's all. To come inside, to be warm, to be dry, to be human again. We were human once. Did you know that? Before the waters rose, before the town betrayed us, we lived on the point, a village of fishermen, and when the ocean came, they left us to drown. But we didn't drown. We changed. We adapted. We survived. And now we only want what was taken from us, our humanity, our warmth, our place on dry land. Marcus's mind reeled. A drowned village, people who'd changed in the deep water, becoming something else. It was impossible. It was insane. But so was everything else that had happened. The light, he said. What does the light have to do with it? The light burns, the voice said. And now it held many tones, many voices speaking in harmony. It burns us, keeps us below, keeps us contained. But on this night, the night of the full moon, we are strong enough to resist it for a time, long enough to make our proposal. What proposal? Join us, the voices said. Turn off the light, walk down the stairs, enter the water. We will take you below, to the old place, and we will show you such wonders. Caves of crystal, gardens of coral, palaces of living stone. You will never be lonely, never be afraid. You will be one of us, one with us forever. Marcus felt the pull of the words, the promise of an end to fear, to isolation, to the crushing weight of consciousness, to dissolve into something larger, something ancient, something that would ask nothing more of him than to exist. It would be so easy to say yes. And if I refuse? He asked. The voices laughed, a sound like waves on rocks. Then you will tend the light until you break, as all the others have broken, until loneliness or fear or simple exhaustion makes you careless. And when you fall, when you fail, when you finally give in, we will be waiting. We are always waiting. Marcus looked at the Fresnel lens, at the beam of light it cast across the dark water. Below, in that water, dozens of figures watched, waiting for his answer. He thought of Eugene, broken and confined to a psychiatric facility, of Thomas Archer, who'd disappeared trying to escape, of Nathaniel Crowe, who'd fallen or been pushed from this very room. All of them had been given the same choice. Marcus took a deep breath and made his decision. Chapter 6. The light. No, Marcus said. The word fell into silence. Then the door exploded inward. They came through in a rush of seawater and rage, figures that had lost the pretense of humanity. Marcus swung the poker, connected with something that felt like waterlogged wood, and it shrieked. More poured through, reaching for him with hands that had too many fingers, mouths that opened too wide. But they stopped at the edge of the light. The Fresnel lens cast its beam in a rotating pattern, and where that light fell directly, the creatures recoiled. Their bodies smoked and steamed where the light touched them. Not enough to destroy them, but enough to cause pain, enough to create a barrier. Marcus understood then. The light was a weapon. Not the diffuse glow that lit the lamp room, but the concentrated beam itself. And he stood at its center, in the only safe place in the tower. The creatures circled him, staying in the shadows between each sweep of the beam, waiting for him to tire, waiting for a chance. You can't survive, they hissed. You need sleep. You need food. You need to leave this room eventually. And we are patient. We have waited 200 years. We can wait a few more days. Marcus's legs already trembled with exhaustion. They were right. He couldn't stay awake forever. But maybe he didn't have to. He looked at the lamp mechanism, at the fuel tank, at the rotation motor. An idea formed desperate, probably stupid, but an idea nonetheless. You want to come in, Marcus called out. "You want the light off? Fine, I'll turn it off." The creatures went still, silent. "But not up here," Marcus continued. "Down below, in the tunnels, where you live. That's where the light should go." Before they could react, Marcus grabbed the emergency fuel can full, thank God, and hurled it through the broken door. It tumbled down the spiral stairs, splashing kerosene as it went. He pulled out a lighter, one he'd kept for the stove, and flicked it alight. "You were human once," Marcus said. "Maybe the light can remind you." He threw the lighter. The stairs erupted in flame. The creatures shrieked and recoiled. Those on the stairs burning, those below retreating. The fire spread downward, following the trail of kerosene, illuminating the spiral in a hellish orange glow. Marcus didn't wait to see the result. He grabbed the navigation radio from its emergency bracketer backup he'd forgotten about and screamed into it. "Mayday, mayday, mayday. This is Blackwater Point Lighthouse. I need immediate evacuation. The structure is on fire. Mayday." Static. Then Tom's real voice, shocked and afraid. "Marcus, what's happening? Are you fire?" Marcus shouted. "The whole tower's going up. Get the Coast Guard. Get anyone. I'm at the top, and I can't get down." He could hear the panic in Tom's response, the scramble of activity. Good, they'd come. They had to come. The flames had reached the base of the lighthouse now. Through the windows, Marcus could see the creatures fleeing back to the water, unable to bear the light and heat. But the fire was spreading faster than he'd anticipated. The old wood of the cottage was catching. Soon the whole structure would be an inferno. Marcus looked at the Fresnel lens one last time. The light still turned, still swept across the water, fulfilling its duty even as everything burned. He climbed out onto the narrow catwalk that circled the lamp room, the cold wind striking him like a slap. 40 meters to the rocks below. He'd never survived the fall. But 20 meters offshore, lit by the flames, he saw Tom's ferry approaching at full speed, its spotlight searching. They'd been close. Tom must have been worried enough to come early. Marcus had one chance. When the ferry got near enough, he'd have to jump for the water. Hope he missed the rocks. Hope Tom could pull him out before the cold took him. Hope the creatures had retreated far enough. It was a terrible plan. It was his only plan. The ferry closed to 15 meters. 10. Tom was shouting something, but Marcus couldn't hear over the roar of the fire. The heat at his back was unbearable. The metal of the lighthouse was starting to groan. 5 meters. Marcus jumped. The air rushed past him. The water rushed up. He had a moment to think that at least it would be quick. And then he hit the ocean like concrete. Cold, darkness, the taste of salt. His body screamed in shock, but he forced himself to kick, to swim, to move toward the searchlight that pierced the water. Hands grabbed in Tom's hands, blessedly human and warm, and hauled him over the side of the ferry. Marcus lay on the deck, gasping and shaking, as Tom gunned the engine and they pulled away from the burning lighthouse. Behind them, Blackwater Point light blazed like a torch against the night sky. The fire had fully engulfed it now, and as Marcus watched, he saw the Fresnel lens crack from the heat. The beam of light shattered into 1,000 fragments, each one casting wild patterns across the water. And in that fragmentary light, Marcus saw them one last time. The creatures, pulled from the deep by the light's death, stood in the shallows and watched their prison burn. For just a moment, in the flickering illumination, they looked almost human, almost sad. Then the lighthouse collapsed. The tower fell in on itself with a roar of stone and metal, and the light went out. Darkness reclaimed Blackwater Point. Tom wrapped a blanket around Marcus's shoulders and steered them toward the mainland. Neither man spoke. What was there to say? Behind them, the fire still burned on the rocks, but it was already fading. By morning, there would be nothing left but ruins. The Coast Guard met them halfway to shore. There were questions, so many questions, but Marcus's story was simple. Electrical fire, had to evacuate, barely survived. He'd stick to that. Who would believe the truth anyway? In the distance, the first light of dawn was touching the horizon. Marcus closed his eyes and, for the first time in a week, felt something like peace. Epilogue. 3 months later, Marcus sat in a small apartment in Portland, reading a newspaper article with hands that no longer shook. Plans to rebuild Blackwater Point Lighthouse abandoned. The headline read, "Following the destruction of the historic lighthouse in October, the Lighthouse Board has decided against reconstruction. The cost is prohibitive," said a spokesperson, "and modern navigation systems make the light unnecessary. The point will remain unmanned." Marcus set down the paper and looked out his window at the city, at the people going about their ordinary lives. They had no idea what was out there, in the deep places waiting. And that was probably for the best. His phone buzzed. He'd gotten a new number, but his heart still jumped whenever it rang. Just Tom this time, checking in. They talked occasionally, never about what happened, always about the weather, sports, meaningless things. "How you doing, son?" Tom asked. "Good," Marcus said, and it was almost true. The nightmares were less frequent now. He could sleep through most nights. The sound of waves no longer made him freeze. "That's good," Tom said. "Real good. Listen, I heard something you might want to know. They're sealing up those tunnels, the ones under the point, filling them with concrete. The Coast Guard found the entrance when they were investigating the fire, said it was a safety hazard." Marcus felt something loosen in his chest. Sealed. That was good. That was very good. "Thanks for telling me," he said. "Yeah, well, I figured you'd want to know. It's over." But it wasn't over. Marcus knew that. Concrete could crack. Seals could break. The things below were patient. They'd waited 200 years. They could wait longer, but they'd have to wait without him. Marcus had told Tom he was looking for a new job. Something in the city. Something surrounded by people and noise and light. Somewhere he'd never be alone. Tom had understood without needing an explanation. As they said goodbye and Marcus hung up, he glanced at the clock. 8:55 p.m. In 5 minutes, it would be 9 o'clock. He tensed despite himself, waiting for the knock that he knew wouldn't come. Because he wasn't on the point anymore. He wasn't in the lighthouse. He was safe, but somewhere, deep in the Atlantic, beyond where maps showed detail, beyond where ships dared to travel, something turned in dark water and dreamed of the surface world. And in that dream, it remembered the taste of lamplight and the sound of a keeper's footsteps on stone stairs. It would wait. It was very, very good at waiting. Closing the lighthouse is gone now. But if you ever find yourself near Blackwater Point on a moonless night, you might see lights moving in the deep water, patterns that could not be natural, movements that suggest purpose. And if you're very unlucky, you might hear them calling, not with voices, not with words, but with the patient, persistent rhythm of something knocking, knock, 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 asking to be let in. This has been the Lighthouse Keeper. Sleep well, if you can.
If this story stayed with you, you're always welcome here. Subscribe to the channel and join us for more stories like this. Quiet, mysterious, and meant to be heard. Until next time.